Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is my buddy Mike Bubb. He's going to share some stories about the great Earl Scruggs.
When Earl Scruggs passed away, that was like, he was on par with people like Louis Armstrong in our musical culture here in America. I mean, the guy revolutionized the style of playing and the instrument that he played, and is really practically solely responsible for creating a whole, style of playing five-string banjo. And of course, when it combined with Bill Monroe's music, it created a whole form of music that created its own music business within the music business, which is bluegrass. I remember Gary calling me when he passed away, that when they were putting the funeral together at the Ryman, that to bring my banjo with me. He said, "You play banjo, right?" And I go, "Well, I used to." And he said, "Well, bring it with you." And I said, I thought for the life of me, I can't imagine him wanting me to actually play at Earl Scruggs' funeral. And I said, "You don't want me to play, do you?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do when you get there." I said, "Okay." And so I also got a call from John McEwen, and he asked me to play on a tune. So I got to actually play at Earl's funeral, which is kind of neat to be a part of it. And at the end of his funeral, which is the same thing they did for Bill Monroe, was they had the limousines parked out in the front of the Ryman, where the little parking drive-through is. And they brought the casket up through the middle of the seats up to that door that goes out. And what they did was they had all the banjo players line that row with their banjos like swords and hold them up. And he passed underneath all those banjo necks. And I thought that was just really a neat, fitting tribute to him. The influence of this man is just really, it's just immeasurable, really. Even outside of the world of bluegrass music, he's. I was at his estate sale at his house. I went there several times, and Eddie Stubbs was there. He always comes in at the end at those estate sales, and we're going through some records and some stuff in the living room, and he pulled out a 45 record, and he goes, "I gave this to Earl." And I go, "What is it?" And he said, "This is Buddy Emmons playing Flint Hills Special on the steel guitar." He said he'd never heard it before, and I got him a copy of it. And he went to put it back in. I said, "I'll take that." So I brought that little 45 home with me, and it's a DJ copy. So I don't know that it ever got released as a single, but I have that little record that Stubbs gave him. Just because of that connection, I wanted to have it. It had a story to go with it. Yeah, it seemed like after his funeral at the Ryman, I didn't come out here for the actual putting the casket in the ground and all that. That was kind of mostly family. But I came afterward, and what the tradition is here, once they put the casket and dirt back in, they take all the flowers and they pile them up on top. So there's like this big mound of flowers. And so I came up here afterward, maybe an hour or two after, and I just hung out here for like 3 hours, and I just kept meeting people. People kept showing up to pay their respects to Mr. Scruggs, and I met one lady who was just sobbing there, standing there sobbing, and I said, "Did you know Earl Scruggs?" And she said, "I grew up across the street from him. My daddy owned the car dealership at Rivergate that everybody bought their cars from." And she said, "Stevie was my high school buddy, and he had a little studio down in the basement, I guess." And she was like an aspiring songwriter. And she said she would make these tapes over there. And she said Mr. Earl even played banjo on some of them, just because he was able to get him. "Hey, Dad, come down and play some banjo on this." And he did, And I thought, wow, that's such a special, unique, So I hope you have those tapes. She goes, "I don't know where they are, but I got to find them." And then at the very end, sort of was getting time to leave because sun was going down. My buddy Don Clark showed up, and he's a Flatt and Scruggs devotee, and he has the Bluegrass Bus Museum, which is dedicated. It's a vintage bus painted up like the Flatt and Scruggs bus, and it's just a rolling museum that he takes to music festivals and stuff kind of here in the area. But he also plays bagpipes, and so he came, and just when the twilight was peaking of the sun going down, he said, "Yeah, it's about right time." And then he just played Amazing Grace, and I filmed him from behind, and then he just kind of walked out of the frame. And I'll get you a copy of that. It's good. And just very, poignant and good closing for a pretty emotional day. It was pretty crazy to again, you think about the impact this guy made, and the travel and what it took to do what he did, in the more primitive times of our country, in the 40s and the 50s, and the way travel was, and he persevered through it all, for the love of the music, because he had to. That's all that was his thing. Even though he became a pilot and did all kinds of other things. Yeah, Louise was such a unique character as well, and she was, she guided the Flatt & Scruggs' career in a way that separated them from the bluegrass pack, in a sense, because she never liked to have their music referred to as bluegrass. She always make sure it was referred to as folk music or country music. And she actually steered them into things that gave them broader appeal outside of what happened to bluegrass during the rock and roll invasion of Elvis Presley in the 50s. That right then is when everything changed, where everything used to live side by side. Bluegrass and country music lived side by side on the radio. All of a sudden, there was a new cultural shift musically, and when that happened, bluegrass got shoved out into the pasture, so to speak, and it survived, but commercially it struggled. But Louise was able to steer Flatt & Scruggs into very commercially viable situations. One being, of course, Beverly Hillbillies, where they were just heard every week on television. And television is still that powerful medium that can really make somebody. I mean, you look at these talent shows that are on television, even the third and fourth and fifth place people, they can have a career because you can't get that kind of exposure. You can't get that kind of promotion. And to know how to capitalize on it, which everybody does now, is an important thing and can actually sustain a career. So she was able to kind of get them outside of the where bluegrass had ended up, which was a struggle, and because they had their own television shows, and then they became part of a national television show, and then later on, of course, Foggy Mountain Breakdown is threaded through the whole Bonnie and Clyde movie, which brought it back again to the forefront, and they used the original 1949 cut of Foggy Mountain Breakdown for that. They didn't do a renewed version of it, because that first one probably had the most energy and the most rawness to it that they wanted for the film, I would say. And she was very sharp in steering their career that way and giving them their own little sort of place in it. And they were uniquely different than everybody else, mainly because of Earl's banjo playing and their style on stage, and again their exposure outside of alongside other country music luminaries or folk luminaries, from the big part of the folk era, Bob Dylan's and so on and so forth. Yeah, if you go to his stone on his marker in the ground is some musical notes, and those are the musical notes to Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And if you go around the backside of it, there's actually a little bit more of it there, but they put the notes, the musical notation for Foggy Mountain Breakdown on there. I thought it was pretty unique. And, that's if you're going to play the banjo, that's the first thing you want to learn. Doesn't matter what decade or how, that thing was recorded in 1949, so everybody wants to play that if you're going to play the banjo.